Welcome to this video tutorial brought to you by simpletut.com, and today I'm going to be showing you how to create your own time lapse similar to the one that you just saw in the video introduction. Whilst I'm going to be using Adobe's After Effects to actually create and put our time lapse together, it's important that you've taken your images and downloaded them into a folder on your computer. Now, although this tutorial is going to start from a point of which you've already taken your images, I will give you some tips on actually photographing the images that you need for your time lapse if you haven't already done so. Now, the first tip I'll give you is that you're going to need a tripod for this, and if possible you're going to also need an SLR to have a high resolution and a high quality time lapse. What you're going to want to do is you want to make sure that you switch your camera to shoot in JPEG, otherwise you're going to have a large amount of editing to do, and you're going to also want to make sure that you've set your camera to aperture priority, because you want to make sure that if the exposure changes during the time lapse, that you're going to be correctly exposing throughout your time lapse and throughout the series of photographs that you're going to need to take. Now, some of the newer SLRs, such as the one I use, the D7000, actually has a built-in mechanism for interval shooting. And what interval shooting is there's a specific calculation that you'll use, and I'll share with you, and you calculate the number of photographs you're going to need to take to actually have a final time lapse to last a certain duration of time. So for example, if I was going to shoot a time lapse that lasts 12 seconds, and I already know that I want to play this time lapse back at 30 frames per second, I need to do a simple calculation of 30 times 12. That gives me 360, and that number is the number of photographs that I need to take to produce a time lapse running at 30 frames, playing at 30 frames per second to last 12 seconds. I also know that I want to take a shot every 2 seconds so that it becomes smooth. Generally, taking 2 shots rather than 1 will make your time lapse slightly smoother, so I need to times that by 2. So 360 times 2 obviously gives me 720, and of course 720 divided by 60 tells me that I'm going to be shooting for 12 minutes to get a total of 12 seconds playback in time lapse. Now, this is a general calculation for creating a time lapse. Now, the one I'm actually using in this tutorial is slightly different. I actually only took 362 images for this time lapse. I had a slightly different calculation, but generally, if your SLR such as D7000 has a built-in function for interval shooting, that's great. Use the calculation I just provided to work out your settings. If not, then you may need to invest in a remote trigger, a digital remote trigger, which will have the ability to allow you to program in interval shooting. As I said, you're going to be wanting to shoot with a fairly large aperture such as f/22, but I actually would recommend shooting between f11 and f16. Generally, SLRs produce their best quality between f11 and f16. Once you get to f22, you start to drop off a little bit, but to keep things simple, I'd suggest that you either shoot in f16 or f22, and aperture priority mode, of course, and make sure that you have dialed in the correct exposure depending on if you're using manual mode or aperture priority. Now, within After Effects, obviously I've already taken my photos, downloaded them to my computer, The first thing I'm going to need to do, and this is actually a very quick thing to produce, is go to File, Import, and File. So all I have to do is browse for my folder. All I have to do is browse for the folder where I've stored my my images. I'm going to hold down Control A to select all my images in the folder. But before I can click Open to import these images, I need to make sure that I tick this checkbox beside JPEG sequence. It will not work unless you've ticked it. And once I've done that, I can just click on Open, and it will actually import my sequence. At this stage, all I actually need to do is create my composition, so I can just drag it down to the timeline, and it actually created my time lapse already. It's all done. If I could actually RAM preview this, and I'll RAM preview it to a second, and then I'll click it again to play it. You can see it's actually already playing the first second of my time lapse, but there is still some work left to be done. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come to Layer, New, and select the Adjustment Layer option. Okay, and then I'm going to hold down Control D and duplicate this so that I have 3 adjustment layers. Now I'm going to come over to my Effects and Presets panel. I'm going to search in for Sharpen, and I'm going to drag this into my first adjustment layer. I'm then going to right click and select Rename, and rename it to Sharpen. And really at this stage, all I need to do is actually come to this and change the value to what I feel is appropriate for this particular time lapse. Some of them I set to 25. It really just depends on the time lapse itself. Depends on what I'm producing, but generally 15, 25, commonly the amount of sharpening I apply. And you can see with and without, it does make a large difference to a time lapse, and it's definitely worth using. Another adjustment that I like to make is curves. So I'm going to drag that, of course, into my second adjustment layer and rename it. And again, I can just adjust this, obviously light and the darks, make it look, obviously you don't want to go too far. Obviously it's gonna over or underexpose depending on which way you're dragging it, as you can see. So you want to keep the change very subtle and only slight, and it again has a very nice effect. And the final adjustment layer is going to be levels. So I again going to drag that into my layer, rename levels, and of course you can just drag this to make it brighter or darker depending on what you feel is required. Again, only slight. But I'm actually quite happy with this. Now the last thing that I like to do is actually come to Layer again, New, and this time select Solid. And the first thing we need to do here is we need to select Make Comp Size. And I like to have the background color black. Make sure this is square pixels and click OK. And I'm going to come and select my rectangle tool. I'm also going to select my title action safe grid. And what I'm going to do is it's going to create a bit of a cinematic effect. Not too much. And of course, this stage, my time lapse is actually created. I can remove this and do RAM preview, and I can see the effect. Now, how do you actually render this? Well, it's actually fairly simple. All you need to do is come to File, Export, and Add to Render Queue. Now, this is the tricky part. This is where we have to actually define our settings. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to select this output module, which is lossless. And the format I would recommend you use is QuickTime. And format options, I'll just check. You want to make sure that you have H2.264 selected here. That's very, very important. I do have that. And if I just click on OK, the only other thing you need to check is under render settings and click on best settings, and you want to check the frame rate. So at this, I'm using actually 30 frames per second, and that's the calculation that I calculated, so that's very important, and that's correct. Now, by output 2, you want to select it, and you can actually select where you want to save and name this file. So I'm just going to save this to this folder, and I'm just going to give it a name of Timelapse tutorial, and click on save. And at this stage, all I have to do is click on render, and it's going to go ahead and create my time lapse. Now, at this stage, once you've actually exported your time lapse, you should have a movie. Looks a bit like this, and it should enable you to actually go ahead and add this to another video or project that you're doing, or put it on YouTube, add music maybe, do whatever you want to do. And that's the quickest and easiest way of creating a time lapse. Once again, I'd like to just take this opportunity to encourage you to visit simpletut.com. We produce tutorials to do with web design, photography, and many other topics. We're adding more every single day, and of course everything is completely free. As always, please rate, comment, and subscribe.